Okay, I think we'll get started. People may be trickling in as they either start or finish dinner or what have you. I'll introduce ourselves again. My name is Tom Guiler. I'm the Director of Museum Affairs here at the Oneida Community Mansion House, and I'm joined by.
And I'm Emily Stegner. I'm the curator of collections.
And over the last year plus, probably a good day back to 2020 or so, we've been working on this exhibit, which is a brand new core exhibit here at the Mansion House, more than a silverware company, Oneida Ltd. Which celebrates the over a century long history and legacy of what was at one time the largest silverware manufacturer in the world. Today, what we're doing is a little bit different in terms of this is our first sort of virtual exhibit tour. So please bear with us, and if we have any technical difficulties, please just throw it in the chat. And we have a laptop here. We can monitor that or raise your hand if you can't hear us. Please let us know. What we'll be doing today is we will be going through case by case each of the different themes and areas of this exhibit. Emily and I are going to take turns, so we'll be passing the mic, so to speak, or the camera, so to speak, back and forth between one another. We're going to go through that for 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have a question and answer session. And note that this is being recorded, but we will stop recording it when the question and answer happens, so we can be a little bit more candid and share some personal stories if you wish. We just want to talk about some upcoming events we have here at the Mansion House coming up, so please do stay tuned. On March 13th, we have Ashley Hopkins Benton from the New York State Museum. She's a curator there who's going to be talking about dress reform and women's rights. That'll be a hybrid lecture. You can come down here at the Mansion House and meet Ashley in person, or it'll be live on Zoom. That'll be March 13th at 6 p.m. You can register for that on our website. It's $10 per person, and of course, our members are always free. Ashley will also have copies of her book, Votes for Women, on site. And if you want to get a signed copy of that, it's a fantastic book brought up by the New York State Museum. We also have on later in March, we have Monk Rowe and the Five Families Ensemble, who will be speaking or who will be playing in the Storage Big Hall. Tickets are available on our website for that. We're continuing Women's History Month on March 27th, rather. I will be giving another hybrid lecture, both here at the Mansion House and on Zoom, entitled Three Harriets, which was based on another exhibit we did, but highlighting the roles of unsung women in the Oneida community. So we'll be doing that at 6 o'clock on March 27th. So do get your tickets for that. Just a couple, by now we're all familiar with Zoom webinars, but just in case you haven't been on one in a while, we do have a few ground rules to cover. The first is that the presenters, us, we will be visible the entire time, but the attendees, you will be muted and off screen. You, however, our attendees can utilize the Q&A box for questions at any time. However, I will warn you that because Emily and I are working, just the two of us today, we won't be able to get to questions until after we're done with the tour. So do either keep them for later, or just pop in the box and we'll answer them as we get started with the Q&A. And then also for those that may be watching that don't want to hear us necessarily, we do have the closed captioning function that's at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom sort of task bar. So without further ado, we'll get started here. So one of the things that the impetus for this exhibit really dates back to COVID. And it dates back to one of our great supporters and board members, Dave Hill, who decided to make an oral history program about the company. Basically to interview the people who made Oneida Ltd special, mainly the employees, their families, and people that whose lives were touched by this global leader in silverware manufacturing. During that period, when everyone was stuck home, we did a bunch of interviews that ranged from people from the factory floor to the boardroom, telling us really what made Oneida Ltd successful, what made it tick, what made it special, and also what led to its downfall, as well as the legacy that this company has, not only right here in Central New York, went across the world. The next thing that happened was actually years and years ago. Before that, was a large collection of Oneida Ltd artifacts that came over from what's now the Oneida Ltd sales office. These were rescued by the curator at the time, Tony Wonderly, and a number of other volunteers who knew the value of that history, the value of those objects, and brought them back here to the Mansion House to one day do something with it. Fast forward a few years later into 2021, 22, Emily and I both came on board and realized that the time was right to make a new core exhibit here at the Mansion House that celebrates and investigates Oneida Ltd. The core of which are those two collections, the oral history collection as well as the object collection, both of which are not complete, by the way. They're also always seeking new voices, new stories about Oneida Ltd, as well as new objects. I'm going to turn it over to Emily right now, who's going to talk a little bit about the immense task she had when she first came on of sorting through all that stuff from the sales office.
Great. So as Tom said, I came on in about 2022, I think it was. And my task initially was solely just to inventory, catalog, basically document this Oneida Ltd collection that had come over from the sales office. And there was hundreds and hundreds of different artifacts, a lot of them being, as you can imagine, spoons, and also these things called peckettes, so like these sort of leather and fabric binders that showcase a particular pattern. So I was at this for about 9 months, just going through this collection to really make it usable for things like a new exhibit, for programs, for students to use, for researchers, all of that good stuff. Yeah, and then once that project was really finished, Tom and I were able to kind of identify some gaps in the collection. So since then, in addition to seeking more oral history interviews and stories, we have also been trying to get some more donations of objects, both like 3D objects, ephemera, so like newspapers, photos, really anything related to Oneida Ltd or kind of the surrounds of the community. So that's kind of what is in this exhibit now, is stuff from the sales office, that whole project, and also things that have been donated in the past year or so.
Or on loan from other supporters,
right.
People that have.
Yep.
This exhibit fits into a larger narrative, a larger project that we have here going on at the Mansion House, that is to widen the story and to deepen the story. Deepening the story is to get into more of the lives of the people who worked at Oneida Ltd, but also the people that lived, worked, and played in the Oneida community. And a good example of that is the 3 Harriet selection that's coming up later this month. Is to dig deeper into that history to find out what the lives were like of individuals here, because everyone had their own experience. But it's also about widening the story. It's not just about the Oneida community that was here from 1848 to 1881, but it's beyond that. It's reaching back into the people that came before the community was here, the indigenous folks that lived here on the property, but also extending that story into the future. Into the 20th century and beyond, to capture Oneida Ltd, to capture what made that story so special. Because really, we think of the story here at the Mansion House as a 3-century story: the Oneida community period, the Oneida Ltd period, and then today, which we are today, which is a nonprofit. So this exhibit is really making sure that people know and that we have established that the Mansion House is the home of the Oneida Ltd story, and this is the only exhibit in America that celebrates and documents that important company. So what we're going to do now is Emily's going to take over for the camera duties, and I'm going to go through our first theme, which is a goodly heritage. Oh, you're good.
Oh, that one. Okay.
You got it.
Thank you. All right.
Come on over.
There we go.
Okay, so the first exhibit panel, that the theme we identified as we were going through the interviews as well as the objects, was a goodly heritage. We wanted to say that really when the Oneida community broke up due to internal and external pressures in the late 19th century, it really ushered in a transformation, an evolution rather than a sort of build break with the community. And really what they did was, as the community broke up, they reorganized themselves as a joint stock corporation, really a secular community. But they didn't throw all of the values and the good things that were important to the United community away. They instead, led by John Humphrey Noyes' son, Pierpont, they take the basics, they take the values of that little community. Things like fairness, things like making quality products, innovation, building and fostering community, being great employers, as well as a sense of valuing the whole over the individual, group decision making, taking care of the whole person, all of these things, and building them into a modern corporation. And just as radical as the Oneida community was, this sort of idea of putting the basis of the business on community, which is what this exhibit's about, is what makes a good business. And that idea was radical for the cutthroat business empires that were burgeoning in the late 19th and early 20th century. If you think about Andrew Carnegie, you think about John D. Rockefeller, these are not people that you would associate with building community. You associate them with more getting as much profit as you can. It was sort of the direct opposite here at Oneida, where it was built on people, right? People. Making a profit was important, but caring for people and building community was equally as important. So this case we've built with a lot of sort of legacy items. The first one we talk about is the flatware business and the different businesses. As many folks know, the Oneida community did not produce silverware from the beginning. They produced animal traps, silk thread, and canned goods. It's not until the late 1870s where you see the flatware industry getting going. But manufacturing, especially industrial manufacturing, is the basis of the Oneida community's success. And that continues after the breakup and into what's known as the Oneida Community Limited period. The company also carries on that tradition of manufacturing, but also throughout the 20th century, what they do is they are also celebrating their heritage in some ways and showcasing it as their brand. So we have a couple of items here that are interesting. These are advertisements and magazines from the mid 20th century, from 1956 and 1949, that are showcasing Oneida Limited's heritage. They're not as much talking about the radical social experiments that were happening here within large family and different ideas of sex and sexuality, but more so about that they're an American company whose products and guarantees go back to the mid 19th century. When we talk about including heritage, which is actually the name of Pierpont Noyes' book that he writes about the building of the company, we're also talking about this being a family company, in the sense that many, many generations worked for it. Descendants of the original community, members of the original community worked for Oneida Ltd. And that's a tradition that continued throughout the 20th century, was generations of parents, children, grandchildren working for this very special company right here in Central. Well, for now, I think we'll turn it over to Emily and we'll do community. So I'm going to take it away.
Yeah, so I think Tom set up really nicely the through line from the old original Oneida community into sort of that second period, the Oneida Limited period. One of the biggest keystones of Oneida Limited's success was its community feeling. And that really came out of people in the company from the top down, treating each other like family. Kind of the first way you see that is our friend again, Pierpont B. Noyes, who's this gentleman right here. This is his father, John Humphrey Noyes, so the founder of the original community. But PB, as we call him, was really he was the president of the company and kind of ushered old community ideals into Oneida Ltd. As a company. So kind of one of the artifacts that we picked to showcase this is this signature book. Unfortunately, we can't see inside of it tonight, but it is filled with probably hundreds of signatures from different employees of all different departments, not apartments, both from Canada, from all over the company, from very high level salespeople, and then also people on the factory floor. So that kind of, again, top-down approach of being very respectful to all people in the company really fed into this family atmosphere. So in addition to kind of the respect for employees, there was also this kind of interest in making a really good life for employees outside of work. So that included essentially building the town of Sherrill, or city of Sherrill. That's actually the smallest city in central New York, or in New York. And so it was really a workers community run by workers, but it was heavily invested in by Oneida Ltd, the company. So that allowed them to get really excellent recreation facilities like the CAC, so the Community Activity Center. And a couple of things in the case we have here to represent that history is this really cool soccer uniform from the CAC. I think it's about 1940s. So there were all kinds of different clubs, both sports and musical, and all kinds of different activities. And then the bowling alley photo right below it, that was a very popular pastime for employees as well. There's several different leagues, and it was really a good way for people to kind of bond after work and create that family feeling. Other sort of recreational facilities that they made were Lewis Point. So that was a sort of, how would I describe it? Like a vacation destination on a lake where you could rent very cheaply cabins. So there would be frequent trips there during the summer as like off season, especially for factory workers getting some off time and cheaply being able to enjoy themselves. And then the last, I guess two more recreational things I'll mention is just one, Sunset Lake. That's more local, close by to Sherrill. That's where a lot of people learned to swim in the people, like local people still around here, like to swim. And right now you can no longer swim there. It's probably too dangerous for all of the buildings and whatnot, but it still exists and has beautiful walking trails. And that kind of goes back to the imprint of things that Oneida Ltd created really still have their imprint felt today. You can see it in the CAC, that's still operating. The bowling alley is still there. You can still use that. Sunset Lake's still there with the trails. And obviously the city of Sherrill as well. And then the last recreational thing I will touch on is the Silver Niblick. So the Oneida Ltd had probably the first or one of the first corporate golf courses in the country, and they made great use of that for both employees to go have around after work, but also for their, I don't know if it's yearly or how often they would do them, but they had this tournament called the Silver Niblick, where they would invite a bunch of sort of their suppliers, other advertisers, so people working for magazines, all sorts of people, inviting them into the community atmosphere of Sherrill and Oneida Ltd for this like very fun kind of rowdy tournament. So yeah, and then I think maybe one of the last things to talk about for community is the really good benefits that the employees were afforded. So one of the, I think Tom and I's more favorite things to talk about is the traveling nurses program. It's kind of a unique thing, I think, where Oneida Ltd hired specifically these nurses who they had their own dedicated vehicle and would go to different homes throughout Cheryl and Oneida, throughout the community to check on employees, whether they were injured at work, whether they were sick, if they were retired. At one point, they were even weekly or even sometimes daily visiting retirees, especially once they were getting towards end of life, to make sure that they had the care that they needed. So that's really, I think, speaks a lot to the level of care that Oneida Ltd was providing for their employees and really treating them, as we say, like a family. Yeah, so I think that gives you some of the community atmosphere of the company. We'll transition now into, I think, innovation, another big theme that stands out in Oneida Ltd's history. As mentioned, one of the ways they were really innovative was treating their employees very well. So that's kind of the first form of innovation you can think about. But they also were innovative in the way that they use materials in developing new products, and also very well known their marketing, like their expertise in marketing. So let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything here. So I think probably one of the earliest for Oneida Ltd, the acronym is still really Oneida Community Ltd. The first major innovation was kind of creating this new form of silver-plated flatware. So when they first started making silverware, there was a lot of competition, especially coming out of Connecticut, and they were trying to figure out a way to make their product stand out. So the way that they decided to do that was create something called triple plate, which essentially means having your silver plating process. So that's when you sort of electroplate silver onto some base metal, so like nickel, copper, steel. They put extra silver onto this during this process, so triple plate instead of like a double plate or something like that. And they started stamping the back of their spoons with triple plate, so people knew it was a better quality. They could charge a little bit more for it while still keeping it affordable because it was still silver plate. So people already start to associate Oneida Ltd and community plate, at the time, community plate with high quality materials. And then another sort of early innovation that they embarked on was using artists both to design flatware patterns and also in their advertising. So when you think about flatware patterns, there's a lot of steps that go into designing and making the individual pieces. And Oneida really started with art pieces. As you can see, watercolor sketches and drawings, and they would make hundreds of these, way more than they ever produced, more patterns than they produced. And then from there, they would have very skilled craftsmen or craftspeople carve out the designs on sort of a larger scale, which is what you see in these silverware molds. And this is to help reduce error. So they're so big because once you shrink them down, the margin for error is greatly reduced once you put it into something called a die. So that's really how the flatware pattern gets stamped out to become what it is when you see it on your table. So there's a lot of attention to detail and very skilled professionals working at all stages of this process. So that really was an innovation that set Oneida Ltd apart from their competitors. Something that Oneida Ltd is probably best known for is their advertising. And very early on, they hired some of the best, most well-known illustrators to basically create art, full-page color pieces of art to help sell their silverware and put them in weekly magazines, so people would be seeing them. People would rip out the advertising and keep them because they were so beautiful. And later on, probably starting in the 60s or 70s, they continued with pretty innovative advertising, but in a more obviously modern way. One kind of classic Oneida advertising design is to have some kind of, as you see with this teddy bear, right in the center here, kind of have this focal point, not really related to silverware, and then just kind of include the brand name and then maybe a spoon. With the advertising, and people really responded to this. Again, people are tearing out pages of magazines to put on like dorm room walls and things like that. So they're really responding well to their customer base and what people wanted. And then maybe, I guess, I've heard some people say that the last successful innovation that Oneida Ltd made, we could debate that point in the Q&A if you would like. But one of the last successful innovations that Oneida Ltd made was around the 1950s when they transitioned into working with stainless steel primarily. Stainless steel was invented in 1913 in England, but it didn't really make its way over extensively into America until after World War II. One of my favorite objects in the exhibit is this photo in the back of the case here of a bunch of factory workers who were some of the first working on stainless steel for Oneida Ltd. And I also just love the story of how we got this photo. It's one of our more recent donations. We have these Oneida Ltd coffee meetups at the end of every month on Wednesday mornings. And one day, a lovely gentleman just decided to pop in. He'd never been in before and brought this photo with him. And this is something that Tom and I had been kind of discussing, like how did the company start doing stainless steel? What's the story behind that? And he just happened to show up with this amazing picture to help us kind of fill in that story a little bit. And I guess stainless steel became very important because for a lot of reasons, it's easier, first of all, as you can imagine, to clean. You don't have to worry about polishing. That was a really big plus. And that's really the reason we still use it today. It's also cheaper, it's more durable. So there's a lot of positives, but that being said, there's some skepticism once Oneida started making stainless steel. One of the articles we have in the case, it's talking about how Oneida Ltd went to this trade show to unveil some of their first stainless steel hollowware, trying to see people's reactions, consumers' reactions to the new product. Mostly it was very positive, but some people had some colorful things to say, like terrible, too much like Romer Peter, and you would trade my silver for this. So there's some skeptics when you're innovating, I guess. Yeah, so as you can see, a lot going on with Oneida Ltd in the 20th century, trying to keep abreast of the times and make a really good product for their customers. So I think now we're gonna pass it over again to Tom.
So one of the things that we wanted to make sure we captured here in the exhibit was not just the amazing history of the community rising from the radical Oneida community, not just the community business aspect, not just the innovation, both in advertising, social engineering, but also technological innovation with flatware. But we needed to come to grips with what is sort of the elephant in the room, which is the downfall of Oneida Ltd. Oneida Ltd did not last forever. Indeed, it did go bankrupt in the early 21st century. And now exists as just a brand, basically. Nothing is manufactured here in central New York that is Oneida Ltd. So we wanted to interrogate the many reasons for that happening, and people have very strong feelings for that. And part of this exhibit, what we wanted to do was give community people, people in Sherrill, people in Kenwood, people in central New York, or anyone that really worked or was impacted by the company, a place to have their voices be heard on what happened here. A place that we hope could be a sort of catharsis or some healing, some closure to what to so many people is a really, really terrible time in their lives. The company starts to lose what makes it special in the late 20th century. And what we've said is we're by no means saying one specific reason why the company declared bankruptcy. Indeed, like many things in history, including the breakup of the Oneida community, there's many, many reasons for it. The first, in no particular order, was that tastes were changing in flatware. People wanted fewer pieces in sets. They wanted more simple, more utilitarian items. They didn't need the big serving sets that you may have seen in the 1950s and 60s. So Oneida was slower to adapt to that. The second thing was that there were also some changes in management. A lot of the older management that were largely folks that have been with the company for many, many years, some of which were those generations of families coming from the Oneida community, started to be replaced by more business people from the outside. That was fueled in large part here by this photograph we have of Pete Noyes, who was PB Noyes' son, who's opening Oneida Ltd on the New York Stock Exchange. It wasn't just a family company anymore where you knew all your stockholders. Now the company is much more beholden to stockholders across the country and around the world who have invested in Oneida Ltd. Believe it or not, one of the other things that happens is globalization. It takes a big toll here in Central New York. Cheaper goods from abroad that are done in a quality manner, not quite to the Oneida community quality standard for sure, start to flood the market, and they're undercut by a lot of overseas brands. In response to that, some of these new management folks do some purchases of companies, such as Viners and others that are bringing these purchases, saddle the company with a lot of debt, and were sort of ill-advised, at least in hindsight, is always 2020. And finally, and this is what's surprising, especially some of our younger visitors who were born not that long ago, is that the 9/11 terror attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon had a major effect on the Oneida community. What we have here in this case is examples of airline flatware. For our younger friends in the audience, yes, at one time you'd be able to board the plane and have the highest quality stainless steel flatware made by Oneida Ltd. Right there to eat your airplane meal. After the 9/11 attacks, unfortunately, metal flatware was banned on flights. Now we go to our plastic and indeed wooden ones that had a flight not too long ago. So Oneida Ltd loses the contracts for these very lucrative, basically every airline in the world, they lose those contracts overnight on September 12th. All of these things come together to spell the end for Oneida Ltd and declare bankruptcy in the early 2000s. We have some of the things that we want to highlight in this case that Emily's been showing. I want to bring up a couple things in particular. This does affect Central New Yorkers. I mean, thousands of Central New Yorkers and people around the world lose their jobs, their manufacturing jobs they thought they'd have for life. And it can't be understated the ripple effect that has. You can see here the destruction of what was the knife plant. We're happy that one of our fantastic donors saved a brick from it, so we have a remnant of it. And we also have a stock certificate. Many of the stories we heard from our oral histories was how much stock employees had and how it ended up going under, and those stock certificates were not worth anything anymore. So, but as we transition to our next area, we didn't want this exhibit to end with that, because Oneida Ltd doesn't end with the bankruptcy, it doesn't end with the closing of the factory here in Sherrill. Oneida Ltd's legacy lives on. It lives on in many different ways, but we wanted to highlight three in particular. The most important one for us is where we are. Oneida Ltd cared for the Mansion House for decades and decades and decades. as a residence, and as an event place, as well as sort of an unofficial company headquarters. Oneida Ltd is the reason the Mansion House is still standing here today as a testament to innovation, community, and the power of imagining a different way of living. So the Oneida Ltd story's home is here because they saved this home. I think that's most important. But also there's some tangible things that we can see today besides coming here to the Mansion House. And the first is Liberty Tabletop Cheryl Manufacturing. These are folks who started up a business shortly after Oneida Ltd's bankruptcy, and they are still producing flatware in the same building on some of the same machines that Oneida Ltd was doing in the late 20th century and into the 21st century. They are still a very much a community-focused company. As you can see here, they've imbued their business model with taking care of that whole person, caring for families. You're not just a worker there, you are really part of a family. But they've also carried on that tradition of quality silverware. They do stainless steel flatware. They also do some silver-plated flatware. And we have some of those on display here. One of the things we like to point out is really twofold. One is the innovation in artistry carries on not only from that Oneida Ltd period, but into Liberty Tabletop. What Liberty Tabletop pioneered was something they call affinity patterns. And these are patterns that speak to people's passions or interests, that speak to their a little more of a fun side of entertaining and flatware. So they began with a pattern that was a skull pattern, they called Claravera, that was speaking really to people that were into Halloween, into spooky season, maybe people that were into riding motorcycles, things like that. And at first they thought, well, we'll try it. But they took off like crazy. And now they have over a dozen different patterns, from honeybees to a 1960s Woodstock theme, to a Celtic theme for the St. Patrick's Day. For those of you who have beach houses or lake houses, they have one for those as well. And they just came out with a new pattern that celebrates everyone's favorite dog. Liberty Tabletop is the only American-made manufacturer of silverware. And to that effect, they also have the exclusive government contract for the government services. That means if you're at the White House or you're at any military installation across this globe, you will be eating off of Liberty Tabletop flatware. One of the pieces we have on here that really blew our mind as we were putting this exhibit together was that this pattern here, Windsor, King's Plate, is actually silver plated. It's one of the few silver plates that Liberty does. And that is in the officers' mess hall on every nuclear submarine all over the world. So you could be cruising the ocean by the Arctic Circle and having a nice meal, and you are having a piece of Central New York right there. So a fantastic legacy. I would also just add that we do periodic factory tours of Liberty Tabletop. So if you're interested in seeing how a coil of stainless steel goes from a giant coil to a lovely fork, please do join us on one of those tours. One of the more surprising legacies of the Oneida Ltd story is a company that is doing extremely important work right now, and that's Indium, the Indium Corporation. Indium actually is a company today that makes solders and alloys for high-end electronics, but they got their start with a man named William Murray. And Dr. Murray was hired by Oneida Ltd in 1924 to try to make a tarnish-free silverware. This is before they even invented stainless steel or perfected stainless steel. And Dr. Murray was using a little known element that people didn't quite understand, called indium, to try to make a tarnish-free silverware. Unfortunately, he doesn't succeed. But he fails up in some ways. He comes out of that. And with the help of Oneida Ltd, they both found the Indium Corporation in 1934 in nearby Utica. Because Murray was like, it doesn't work for silverware, but it definitely can work for some other application. So in 1934, he founds indium, and they cut their teeth on doing a lot of war work during World War I and II, doing especially things for aircraft engines and ball bearings. In the 1960s, indium expands into alloys and making solder. So alloys being mixes of different metals, including indium, and making solders, which is a sort of a glue that brings two metals together. They find super big success in radios and transistors and televisions, early electronics. And by the 1980s, as the computer age is dawning, they get into semiconductors, which are basically the things that make computers work. And today, Indium is a worldwide corporation. They have offices all over the world, but still headquartered in central New York. And they are making components for cell phones. Indeed, the reason that your touch screen works, which you may be watching on today, is because there's indium in it. If you have an electric car, there's plenty of indium in that, as well as indium is in space flight. So things that are going to the moon, going to Mars, you could bet there's indium going on in that as well. And that's all because of another legacy of Oneida Ltd, right? Indium isn't here without them hiring William Murray to try to figure out a flatten the problem that turned into something that's shaping our very future. I'm going to turn it over to Emily now. We're going to do two more. We're going to have two more sections of this exhibit. But the first is one of our interactive ones. And what I want to say is, just because you're here on this virtual tour, we're very, very happy you are. But there's some things that you really got to experience in person. So we hope you come out. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily, and we'll show you one of our favorite interactives.
Yeah, so the first one is this beautiful big case right here. So this is actually a piece that came right directly from the sales office in that 2014 original move. And our director of buildings and grounds likes to remind me and Tom constantly of how many times he had to move this very big, heavy piece of furniture. So we really took it upon ourselves to use this and give it a nice new home in this core exhibit where it doesn't have to move very often. And it's exemplifying what is called OCQ, so Oneida Community
Quality.
Yeah, Oneida Community Quality. And that really stands for the quality of the products. So very quickly, as we have mentioned, Oneida became almost synonymous with good quality products, durable products, and very stylish, fashionable products. And the employees and consumers of Oneida Ltd products were very proud of that. So OCQ is also kind of also synonymous with a prideful feeling around Oneida Ltd. Yes, and then I guess I should talk about this nice little cube here as well. So this is what is, I guess, called the Oneida Cube. It's also been referred to as a tessera hospitalis, and that comes from the ancient Roman custom of hospitality. If visitors were going into a host's home, the host would often give them some token as a form of appreciation for their visit. Sometimes that would be the silver cube, hence this Oneida emblazoned silver cube. And that really speaks to Oneida's feeling of community and family orientedness, and really trying to welcome and support people in the company. And then this symbol, even though this particular one is in fact a 3D object, this cube began to be included in marketing, advertising, and also stamped on the back of some spoons, depending on what the sort of quality or line of the silverware was. So you start to see this cube a lot after 1965, roughly. Yes, and then so back to this case, I kind of left going from finger. So inside this case are, I think, about 300 different flatware patterns that Oneida Ltd made. So these were a lot of the spoons that I mentioned inventory and cataloging when I first got here. And we really wanted people to be able to kind of see the platform for themselves. And explore the different patterns, because a lot of people do have an affinity with a certain pattern, whether because their grandmother had it, their family had it, it's their wedding pattern. They very much enjoy trying to find their pattern in this case. This is not even even close to all of the patterns that Oneida Ltd made. A lot of these are probably second half of the 20th century or later. They're mostly all stainless steel. And they are alphabetically organized. So if you do come in, you can try to find your pattern. And then sometimes people wonder what this blue paint on the spoons are. So a lot of the spoons in this drawer, which are able to be touched, are duplicates in our collection. And they were sort of duplicates in their original use, because this paint was to tell people working in the factory or at the sales office that these were sort of sample patterns. They're not to be sold. So now they're continuing to live their life as samples. Yeah, this is definitely something we, as Tom said, encourage you to see in person. And there's this one single fork. I think there's only one fork in this whole case, for good reason, because it makes the drawers a little bit hard to open. And people do ask what this case used to be used for. I think in its original life, it was probably for printing, but when it was in the sales office at Oneida Ltd, it held competitor patterns. So things like Gorham, some Tiffany, Rita Martin, that kind of thing. A lot of them are also sterling pieces, which is interesting because Oneida Ltd did make sterling, but that wasn't really their major business. Yeah, so this is one interactive we have in the exhibit. The other one is a little bit more high tech. And it is also something that can be accessed online. So you can really be anywhere in the world and play with the online portion of this exhibit. We will be dropping the link in the chat before the live is over. This is sort of a compilation of a lot of archival materials, so photos and films, and then also housing our oral histories, which are digital. So they're all on this screen. And I guess I'll give a little bit of a demo of how to navigate it. So we'll start off with our oral histories. And I will say we do have, I don't know, probably close to 40 or so, maybe almost 50 now, oral histories. This is only a small sampling of those, and we will be continuing to update both the oral histories and everything else on this platform. And these are just snippets of sometimes hour or longer oral histories. So we've included pictures of relevant, that are relevant to what we talked about, as well as if you can't for some reason listen to the audio, there is a transcription right next to it. And we do have some of our lovely oral history volunteers credited for their amazing stories. Should I play one or maybe
do a picture?
Okay. So that's what the first of 3 sections. You can hit return to exhibition at the top when you want to go back. I think our internet's a little slow because we're also doing a Zoom meeting right now. Hopefully it will load. And as I mentioned, the other 2 sections are photos and archival film reels. We did just get a grant to digitize more film reels. I think it's about 30 hours of film relating to events and other things around Oneida Ltd. So that's very interesting. Those will eventually be up on the screen and also on YouTube. And even though this tends to be paused, I do just want to mention that you can add info to this website. So if you want to help us out identifying any people, places, or events, if you go to the photo tab or the film tab, I think actually just the photo tab. If you scroll all the way down after clicking on a photo, there's a little middle box where you can type in whatever you want, and it gets sent directly to me and Tom, so we can add your information right back into the website. Yeah.
All right. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm going to drop that link into the chat for you guys. For those of you watching on YouTube, it will be in the description as well. But I just want to thank you for joining us. This is going to end the recorded portion. We're going to stick around for Q&A, but I want to thank you all for coming. And for those of you who are near or far, we invite you to come to the Mansion House anytime. Every day minus major holidays from 9 to 5 to check out this exhibit. I just want to end with saying what the Mansion House is today. So it may have been a long time since you connected with us. Today the Mansion House is three main things. We are a National Historic Landmark and museum whose mission is to use our historic site and collections to inspire people to think about and to reflect on the pressing social issues that are facing our nation today, and to imagine a better world. We have educational programming for K through 12 students. We have a college programming, as well as continuing education program for learners of all ages. Second, we are a event space and historic inn. We have 14 guest rooms. You can literally spend a night at the museum if you like. We also have event spaces. So if you're looking for your next wedding, your corporate retreat, we have space for that. We also have performances. Like I said, we have Monk Row coming later this month or later next month. We have concerts and other performances on a regular basis. And finally, and sort of our longest serving role is that of a resident. So we're still a residence here for about 30 people. And we're proud to say that we've been a resident since 1862. When this building was completed. So if you are interested in following along, we sure hope you are. Check out our website, sign up for our e-news, or better yet, become a member. Members get discounts. They hear first about everything we're doing here. And you want to be a member because we've got some really exciting things coming up this year for you. So we're going to take a short break before Q&A. I'm going to pop that link in there. But stay tuned and we'll be right back. Thank you.